Hey guys, we're going to be in Colossians chapter 3 today. Colossians chapter 3 in verse 23, as a matter of fact. Listen to this. And whatsoever ye do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. A lot of times you hear me say in sermons, or those who are at the church and hear me say in sermons, that we ought to be the very best of the people out there. And I don't mean in the sense of some kind of competition or something, but if we belong to God, we ought to be the very best at what we do. I often say or quote some other people that say, if it's Christian, it ought to be better. You know, here's the thing. There are an awful lot of talented people who do not know Christ. And I see some of the things that they paint, some of the things that they do. And I'm not talking about the filthy stuff. I'm talking about the really good stuff that I see out there that I go, my goodness gracious, that is incredible talent. But just think if that talent is turned to God, that a person becomes a born-again believer, they ought to be using that talent for the glory of the gospel and for the glory of the kingdom. And they ought to be doing it heartily as unto the Lord. Anything you do for the Lord ought to be done with energy, with excitement, with joy. It doesn't matter if it's being behind a pulpit, being in front of a camera, or being away from the camera, being behind the camera. You know, in front of the camera or behind the camera. Two different roles, simply important. Both of them are just simply important, and they're needed. But we ought to do each role as though we're doing it directly for the Lord. Because guess what? We are. Especially in ministry, we kind of say, well, listen, we're working for the Lord. But if you're out there and you're teaching, or you're out there, you're a nurse, or you're out there and you're a plumber, you're out there, whatever it is you're doing, you're in ministry in the sense because you are showing the world what it is to be a Christian worker. It ought to be that everybody wants a Christian, but that's not the case because many times Christians act like non-Christians or act like normal human beings in the sense that we can get lazy, but we're not the best employees, we're not the best workers, or we're not the best bosses or managers or CEOs or directors or anything like that, when in fact we should be. We should be working as though we're working for the Lord, diligently, unashamedly. We should be the very best mechanic, if you're a mechanic, that you can be. It ought to be that people are going around saying, I've got to hire a Christian. Yes, I know they'll be witnessing, but I got to hire one because those Christians, they know how to work. They're workers. They're hard workers. Let me give you an example. For years and years, the debate over whether or not we would have, hire Mexicans in construction. This is just the truth, that we would hire Mexicans in construction. There was a debate out there, they're illegal, this, and this. But what we realized is, as a culture, it wasn't true of every single one of them, but as a culture, they were coming here and they were working very, very hard. It wasn't true of every culture, but for them, they were working very hard and they wanted to make money. They were sending money home. They were doing everything that they could. So it was interesting. I was like, man, we got to hire, this particular person. There would be, other people that would come and want jobs. And we're like, man, we need some guys. And we weren't paying low. I mean, obviously, I know that some people wanted great work for low pay. But man, it was like, trying to find them with, that were legal, trying to find them, for the sake of making sure that they had their paperwork. All those things like that were crazy. But we would do whatever we had to do in order to get these hard workers. Certainly we had plenty of people, from America that were, from the United States that were working. Thank God for that. But I'm going to tell you, that's what it ought to be for Christians. It ought to be such that they say, we've got to find a Christian, a real Christian. If we can find a real Christian to work here, we know that they'll work hard, okay, because they're working for the Lord. That's a command, folks. You don't get to decide that. You are to work hard. You're to work diligently. You should use your gifts for the Lord, praise God, and you should be unashamed to use your gifts for the Lord. You ought to give it everything you've got. Be the best plumber, be the best teacher, be the best you can be the best at anything you do. Pick up trash like nobody else picked up trash before. Be an example for the rest of the world. Love you guys. Bye-bye.